Hey guys, what's up? Mike here, and welcome back to another My Hero Academia review. This week's chapter is 132, and we are slowly but surely getting towards a climax of this arc. I mean, this arc does seem like it's going to be a bit longer, especially with the amount of setup that we've gotten in the last little while. I mean, it kind of feels like a lot of setup, but I guess it's just an average amount for the most part. But there is a lot going on around this, and a lot of things preparing to explode, or as we can see, kind of leading to other things along the way. For example, the dart that was introduced in this chapter, along with Suneater's quirk. I mean, there's a lot of potential possibility that could be done with Suneater's quirk if he still has it. I'll get into that a bit later, but I really like the Suneater introduction, and along with his personality, really goes in contrast with a lot of the other characters that we've seen throughout the series. So I'll get into that a bit, but first, let's get in the review today, guys. So the chapter starts off at Shisaki's underground base, and I did theorize that this was underground a couple chapters ago. It's not really hard to figure out, but we do figure out that they're kind of connected through a series of tunnels underground, and Shigaraki actually had a long, hard time trying to find them. He was walking around for a long time over and over again, trying to find this room or whatever, their base. And it seems like they have multiple bases connected throughout the underground passageway, which at the same time, I think that's really clever, but at the same time, it's like, how did that not get noticed? And how do these guys construct this place, or even, inhabit this place? Like, where was it before, and how did it get there? That's just my main question, but besides that, it's really clever, and it makes sense for why they've been able to keep in hiding for all these years. They're able to just get anything they need by traveling underground through these passageways and just living in their hideouts. We then go on to see the kind of discussion slash collaboration between Sasaki and Shigaraki, and them going on to talk about, how their plans will work together, and basically Shigaraki saying that the only reason he's here is because his goals align with Shisaki's. They basically have the same idea where they want to expand both of their organizations in order to create a goal. But the thing is, we haven't actually seen Overhaul's plan yet. So that's kind of one of Shisaki's conditions. He wants to be able to know the plan, and the other one is that they will be able to do whatever they want. Like I said earlier, a couple weeks ago, he wasn't going to let this guy take the reins. It's going to be a 50-50 kind of deal where there's going to be two leaders. Shisaki's never going to bow down to another leader. He's always going to be the number one in his spot, because just because of the way that the story's progressed and designed, we can see that Shisaki's kind of the opposite of Izuku in a way, where he's going to be the prodigy for the villain side, whereas Izuku is kind of the prodigy for the good side. Then we get in a little bit of a spat between the crew at Overhaul's place, because Shigaraki actually ended up putting his foot on the table, getting it dirty, kind of acting like the normal Shigaraki that we know. But to these guys, it's obviously a little bit of a cocky move, because he's not acknowledging how well-versed and how well-powerful the Yakuza has been all over these years, and especially how the 8 Percepts of Death are, kind of just a force to be reckoned with these days. So two of Shisaki's underlings, or assistants, or whatever, come up and they try to, intimidate Shigaraki in a way. The one puts his gun. The one with the gun, I think, is my personal favorite. Although I do like Mimic. I kind of just misunderstood what was going on with his quirk in this panel. I really couldn't understand what he was doing. It seemed like some sort of gigantification quirk, like the buff quirk that we saw when they first introduced Shisaki's gang. But the one with the gun, I think, is very, very cool. And a lot more behind him as well. Because we saw back when they were first introduced that he was the one who actually shot compression and made his quirk not work anymore. And Shigaraki even goes on to mention this later in the chapter when he says, we've lost an arm along with a guy and his quirk as well. And losing one of my men is not as bad as losing one of your men, is what he says. I don't know if I believe it necessarily, but I think that they're both pretty similar when it comes to abilities. Maybe even Shisaki's men are a little bit ahead of some of Shigaraki's. It goes quirk versus quirk. It's hard to say who's really above one or the other, but it is interesting to think about. Overhaul kind of tells him to back off and let Shigaraki know that, alright, whatever, we'll probably be doing this. Like, he doesn't actually say that, but it kind of goes by the look on his face. He says, okay, well, back off, calm down, we don't want to piss this guy off too much, because he is actually going to do us a favor. This is a mutually beneficial relationship, so we're going to be able to benefit one party or the other. So you can't be thinking that you're above him if you're both mutually benefiting from this relationship. And then at the end of the discussion, Shigaraki actually pulls out the bullet that was in Compression's arm, or whatever, that caused him to lose his quirk. Now this bullet has got to be part of Overhaul's plan. And I'm just going to go ahead and kind of skip a little bit ahead in this chapter. I'm going to talk about this as well in a bit. But I'm going to mention that the bullet was later on used by a regular thug right out in the open against Suneater. And actually hit him and probably made his quirk so that it doesn't work. Now I'm thinking that this little bullet kind of thing has a lot to do with the plan. Like Shigaraki says, I mean, that's kind of obvious that it has a lot to do with the plan, but I think that has a lot to do with the foreshadowing that we've been given earlier on, especially with the little girl. I think that this bullet has something to do with quirk removing, and I think that whatever substance is in it is being extracted from that girl. Her ability is going to have something to do with being able to remove a quirk, but only if that kind of, maybe her blood or something is ingested into another person's body. Who knows? But that's an interesting theory that I think is probably coming to fruition as we see later on in the chapter. So then we go on to the town kind of area where we see Red Riot and Suneater and the new hero that we just got introduced to this chapter, the fat guy. I also think his quirk is very good as well, because he can actually submerge people into his body. Kind of like Togata's in a way, but in a way he actually can kind of just trap people inside of him because of how big he is. So I feel like that has a lot of uses to it as well, along with Suneater's quirk, which we'll talk about in a second. But the one thug actually had a quirk like edge shots. And that was kind of random. I mean, it wasn't really needed to be put in there, but I found that it was kind of interesting to think that there are other heroes out there, not heroes, but other people out there that can have really, really good quirks, but won't be able to use them the way that the pro heroes are able to, you know, utilize them. And if you're not smart, you're not going to be able to use your quirk as well as someone who is just generally intelligent. It's kind of a simple fact. We dive a little bit into the personality of Suneater and what kind of guy he's like. And it is interesting to see what kind of guy he's like, because he's not normal. He's not like any other character we've really seen. I mean, in a way, he's kind of like Izuku, but Izuku has confidence. This guy has a lot of mental issues, as we can see, especially Big Fat Hero. I don't know his name, but I'm just going to call him the Big Fat Guy or whatever. Kind of sounds mean, but it's what he is. I mean, he calls himself by that, so whatever. Anyways, he says that he has a lot of mental issues, that Suneater has a lot of mental issues, but he's one of the top heroes when it comes to abilities. So you really can use his brain in certain situations and be able to come out on top. It's a lack of confidence that is where his downfall really starts to begin. But when his abilities come into factor, they get really, really strong. And we see that he's able to manifest some sort of ability from any type of food that he eats when it comes to animals. I mean, I imagine it's only for animal living beings, but at the same time, what if it wasn't? I mean, what if he was able to manufacture, you know, the kind of properties of things, whatever he eats, into his body, kind of like Momo a little bit. She's able to, you know, recognize the design of something by eating it a little. I know she doesn't eat everything, but as long as she knows the molecular breakdown of it, she's able to create it. So what if it's kind of the same idea for Suneater? As long as he knows kind of what it's made of, he's able to reintroduce that into his body. For example, if he were to eat, you know, some sort of Jolly Rancher, and he wanted to make his arm into a Jolly Rancher punching machine, would he be able to do that and just have a really hard, I mean, it wouldn't be that hard because it's Jolly Rancher, but I'm just using it as an example, you know, it's interesting to think about. So then, at the end of the chapter, these thugs kind of come out of nowhere, and Suneater has to step up and do a little work, and he kind of does a little bit of an octopus hand, and then a shell for a hand, like a clam shell for a hand, and punches the guy in the face. And he's obviously really self-conscious about his abilities, which, you know what, I do like that, but at the same time, he's probably not going to be one of my favorite characters just because he will get a lot of development, but I feel like at this point, you know, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me why he's not confident. And it may be different for other people analyzing this scenario. Like, if you like this guy, that's fine, but he's not my biggest, I'm not the biggest fan of him right now. Either way, he uses his powers and kind of overpowers this guy completely, and then the guy in the crowd pulls out the gun that I was talking about earlier, shoots Suneater, and we don't really get to see anything after this because it's kind of the end of the chapter, but he also tries to shoot Red Riot, and he gets, obviously it doesn't work because Red Riot has really tough skin, so it kind of just bounces off of him. And we're set up for a fight next chapter with the first interaction of Red Riot and actual villain. Not the first interaction, but the first kind of training interaction that we're getting. Anyways, guys, this chapter was a hell of a chapter. I really enjoyed it. A lot of new stuff being introduced, new characters being, you know, fleshed out, like Suneater. And I know I said earlier that I don't really like him that much, but then again, I do like certain parts about him, and he will probably come to grow on me like certain characters do, because there is a lot of good development in this series. But either way, like I said, this chapter was great. Thank you for watching the review. If you liked it, comment and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you in the next one, guys. See ya. Peace.